I'm talking to the infamous turd flinging monkey, one of the more popular YouTube channels with MGTOW content. Today we're just having kind of a casual discussion about MGTOW related things. Maybe we'll talk about other subjects as well, who knows. So yeah, I've subscribed to Turd Flinging Monkey since his channel was probably about like a month or two old. Watched most of his videos, and yeah, definitely a great opportunity to talk to him. So thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure. I've been subscribed to you probably, I mean, obviously longer than I've had a channel. I've been in, the MGTOW community for a while, just as, a subscriber and commentator. I basically just made my first video as I was bored because it was like Martin Luther King Day. I didn't have work. I didn't have school. So I was like, I'll make a video. Why not? I wasn't really expecting the support that I ended up getting. I was really kind of blown away by it. So.
Yeah, your channel took off very quickly. Like, you got subscribers like within the first few weeks, very rapidly. Which is great. You definitely deserve them.
Yeah, it's really weird because I remember I wasn't expecting. My goal when I first started my channel was 500 subscribers in the first 6 months. I told myself if I didn't have 500, I was gonna not necessarily quit, but devote less time to it. I wasn't gonna really make it a priority because obviously people didn't care. But then in my first month, I had 1,500, and a lot of that had to do with Sandman plugging my video. Like it was like a week or so after my channel started, he plugged some of my videos. And then even the first day, like when I first made my first video, I sent some videos out to some people that I was subscribed to. One of them was Raging Golden Eagle, and like the day after my first video went live, he plugged my video, just saying it was good, and I got like 150 subscribers just from him. So
that's one of the good things I noticed about like MGTOW in general. Like that's probably how I got a few subscribers to start with. Is ex Paladoc, Truth Over Everything. They just like mention your name, put a link, and you get like 100 or more subscribers easily. It's good that like guys support each other. Whereas in like outside of this community, it's not so much like that in general.
Yeah, man, I really miss Truth Over Everything. He was a great guy. He actually mentored me the first couple months I started, and I'm really sad that he's gone.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to his channel, why he left, but yeah, definitely was a great pillar for like the MGTOW content. I watched most of his videos, and yeah, just like some of the things he woke me up to as well. Just yeah, very much appreciate his work. I do hope he comes back, but who knows?
He was one of the inspirations because when I decided to make a channel, I kind of thought to myself, okay, what kind of content do I want to make? And I took little bits and pieces from channels I liked. Like I wanted to focus on, big issues, but I also wanted to have fun, and I wanted to make it enjoyable and entertaining, but I wanted to make sure I did my research, but I wanted to have production. So my main inspirations were Truth Over Everything, Sandman, if only just for the production value, and Stardust, just because the way he goes into topics. So I kind of like took like a mash of what I liked about those channels to try to come up with a way to guide how my channel was going to be. And I've obviously, kind of veered in different directions, like the news stuff and the comedy stuff, but that was the original vision.
Yeah, I guess like the way I got into making content is I wrote an email to Sandman, and he made a video on the subject. He called the video "The Best of Both Worlds," where I just pretty much gave my 2 cents about my past relationships with women. And the video got quite a few views and was well received. And I thought, you know, it felt good to have people like listen to what you have to say. And then I used to be involved with like this organization called like the Zeitgeist Movement. So I used to like go to meetings and stuff and talk about economic problems and so on. And then when I started to bring up, you know, back then I would refer to it as kind of like third wave feminism. I used to think the problem was more feminism than gynocentrism. When I'd bring up subjects to do with that, I would notice that all of the women would turn against me, and so would most of the guys, except you know, maybe one of them who probably had a bit more experience with women than the others. And just the hostility that I faced within a group that I considered like to be my friends very much so, was very much surprising to me. So my first video was pretty much based on the fallout I had with that group, based on them essentially being, you know, gynocentric and not accepting the male perspective of reality pretty much. And then, yeah, basically my format is to just like, most of my videos are just spontaneous things that I kind of rush through. Besides like a few of my rap songs, which I put a bit more time in, but yeah.
Yeah. When I mute, it's just so I don't get a feedback. I'm not like gone. But yeah, the video that really got my attention, I mean, I think I was subscribed before that, but the video I really remember that really turned me onto your channel was you did that song, and you ended it with "When bitches be cray, men go their own way."
Yeah, the epic movie trailer.
I was like, oh man, this guy knows what's up. So good time.
Yeah, I enjoyed making that one. I had a bit of fun with that. It's like my channels, sorry, my videos, they always represent the mood that I'm in. I'm like, I look at my videos and like sometimes I'm making comedy, sometimes I'm making like really far out scary shit, like emotional venting kind of. What I noticed, like one of your videos that like it's probably my favorite is the one, what's it called? Men are smarter than women, deal with it. Because before that, I had, you know, used in my videos that IQ graph that shows that women make up the medium of IQs and men are on the extreme of intelligence and extreme of stupidity. That was my understanding. And then when you brought up the fact that these experiments were based on students pre-teen age, and females develop 3 years before guys in terms of their brain development, I saw how like unscientific the studies were to get that data, and things started to make a little bit more sense in the way that I see, you know, girls in general probably aren't as intelligent as guys, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah, actually, one of the videos I plan on doing is kind of walk you through the gynocentrism that is in these studies. Like, I was actually researching something, I can't remember what, I was in some debate, and I looked up this study that specifically talked about what it called the myth, that it was like myth, men have bigger brains than women and they're more intelligent. And then it goes into, you know, how men's brains are bigger, but that there's just no link between brain size and intelligence, no correlation whatsoever. But you could see, I mean, just Google the SAT is sexist or the ACT is sexist. You'll see that men score about 35 points higher on the SAT or ACT than women. And this is even in like the subjects that women are supposedly better at. And these articles are just so gynocentric because, like, when they're talking about these tests, they'll say how, but women do so much better, they have better grades than boys. Why are they scoring lower on the test? But you can just follow the rabbit hole. The reason why they get better grades is because they've changed how grading works in school to de-emphasize testing. because studies found that boys did better on tests and girls were more organized and did better with homework. But this is how bad it's
And also I also think that sorry, my audio is going crazy. Yeah, can you hear me properly?
Yeah, I think it's me. Let me mute myself so I don't create an echo.
Yeah, like what I noticed is that I think that grades very much measure obedience, and I find that in general women are more obedient to quote unquote authority than men are, because that has been their survival strategy through reproduction, etc. So it carries out subtly. It's kind of obvious to me, but in other areas of their life. So basically, what I've had noticed in my relations with women in the past is that they seem to have trouble grasping very abstract, holistic concepts where you need to know a little bit about a lot of different things in order to form a cohesive picture, where women seem to be okay at very specialized tasks, repetitive tasks, route learning. They don't seem to have the same ability as men in general as being able to form a cohesive picture based on a lot of different data and based on like creative flair and intrinsic internal drives, as opposed to doing what you're being told to do, being the motivation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, women and men just think differently because we are built to do different things. Now, but my point about the grading, why girls get better grades than boys, is basically the way grades are worked now. 50% of your grade is homework. About, I think it's 20% is attendance and behavior, and 30% is tests. So a boy who doesn't really do his homework and acts up in class, but knows the material front and back, will fail the class, get an F. But a girl who is behaved, who does her homework, but doesn't know shit, will get a C and be passed on to the next grade, even though she doesn't know anything, because she did her homework. But you can copy your homework off of other people. So it doesn't actually prove you know anything. The only thing that proves you know something personally is taking a test. So these people who say, oh, I'm just a bad test taker, well, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. That's why you're a bad test taker. Sure, you could copy your homework off of somebody, but if you can't take a test, you don't really know it. So anyway, so they changed the way grades work to help women. And then, so women get better grades than boys, but then when they take the test to go to college, they do worse than boys. And there's all these campaigns, I mean, just Google it, where they talk about this testing is sexist, testing is sexist. So they're trying to de-emphasize testing. And of course, like, I've had so many, I mean, you just scroll through the comment section of my Men Are Smarter Than Women, Deal With It video. It's just white knight after white knight talking about how IQ testing doesn't matter, and there's different ways to measure intelligence, which just can't be quantified, and you just need to take women's word for it that they're smart. And even if it can't be measured, or if they fail every objective measurement, they're just as smart. You can't question it. And it's just stupid. And I understand that's why I call egalitarianism a religion, because there's no proof behind it. You just believe that the sexes are equal, despite any evidence, and any evidence that objectively proves the sexes aren't equal, you just have to dismiss or rationalize away. And it's the same behavior you see with religious people who hold nutty beliefs, and when they're confronted with the contradictions of their own beliefs, they just rationalize it away. They don't confront that they're wrong and that the evidence does not match their beliefs. They just rationalize it away. And you see the same thing with egalitarianism. That's why it's a religion, or the equivalent of it, it's a secular religion. And talking about gynocentrism, I think the difference between, because everyone blames feminism, because feminism is the obvious issue, but the other side of the coin, the other side of the gynocentric coin of feminism is traditionalism. And it's the side that traditionalists object to feminism, but they also enable feminism because their philosophy is that men should continue to be responsible. They should assume their traditional roles, despite that women have been liberated from their traditional they're not calling for patriarchy. They're not calling for a return to women to become the property of men. But they still assume, they still demand, and they still pressure men to assume these traditional responsibilities to care for and provide for women, even though they get nothing out of it.
They want chivalry plus equality. So basically, sorry, could you mute your microphone? Sounds horrible. Basically, what the traditionalists want is chivalry plus equality, and they want that in their personal lives, their dating lives, and where I think this manifests this attitude that we should still treat women with chivalry, treat them as separate, as a distinct class, plus equality is where women get the benefits of both, ideals. So the area that I find this is most evident is with female athletes. So basically, female athletes, the way I put it when I talk about it on social media, is that they're essentially a prettier version of the disabled league. They're pretty much disabled compared to the men. They don't have as much ability. And they are being, people say it's degrading to say that. Well, I'm saying, no, it's degrading to put them into a lower grade than men, because on the aggregate that they are, inferior to men athletically. It doesn't mean that some women don't have the potential to compete at the same level as men. See, all this hype about, Ronda Rousey saying she could beat up men. I would love to see her fight a man, even if she won, even if she lost. I think it would just be interesting for women to compete at the same level as men do. But then you have the traditionalist ingrained value where she still uses that old chivalrous notion that, men should never hit women, just so that she can get away with having all of the respect that, a top male MMA fighter would have without actually having to reach that same skill level.
Yeah, did you see the article about Tank Abbott and Ronda Rousey?
Yes, I thought that was hilarious. Make me a sandwich if I win, and if you win, I'll give you $100,000. I think that sounded like a pretty nice deal to me.
Yeah, and he's like a mid-tier UFC fighter. He's not like one of the big, people that has like a huge undefeated streak.
Oh yeah, I've made a video, and I think Coltane made another good video on how significant the difference is between men and women when it comes to athletes. The best example I can put simply is that the world number one world record holder in the women's 100-meter sprint would rank well below 3,000. Sorry, she is still 0.5 of a second off the third thousand fastest male, which means there'd probably be possibly even 10, 20,000 people between that difference. She's still would lose to the under 18 male 100-meter sprint world record, and she would only just beat the world record for the fastest blind man at 100-meter sprints.
Well, I think what it really comes down to is men and women have different types of bodies. Men are naturally stronger, but women are more flexible. So if you look at the sports, if you look at sports like the WNBA, where they tried to be a men's sport but make it with women, nobody watches the WNBA because it looks like a high school JV team. Nobody cares about women trying to compete with men because they're weaker than men. However, there are sports where women are popular and people pay to see them, and it's sports that emphasize a woman's flexibility, because that is the category where she actually has an advantage over a man. Women are just naturally more flexible. So if you look at figure skating, gymnastics, dancing, stuff like that, stuff where a woman's flexibility is showcased, they can compete on their own, or they're better than men. They're more entertaining. They're better to watch.
Most definitely. I had this same conversation, similar conversation when I posted the MMA fighter that challenged Ronda Rousey. When I posted that thread, the guy who kept saying that I'm one of like my friends that kept commenting on it was saying that I'm just trying to disempower women. I'm like, no, this works both ways. This logic, because I do Bikram yoga, which is essentially very strenuous flexing in a hot room for about 90 minutes, and I'd probably be in the bottom 30% of skill level in that class, and 95% of the people in there are females. So definitely have to agree that women are just way more flexible than guys in general. And if men and women competed in sports that require flexibility, and male and female leagues were eradicated, there'd still probably be a dominance of women in those areas. Other things like netball, which is still female-dominated sports, I think men would take over, but women would still have like some leverage in their athleticism.
Yeah, well, any sport that involves competition, men would dominate simply like any contact sport, because men are bigger and stronger, even if flexibility was a factor. That's why women do best in sports where they're judged. Like, skating and gymnastics, it's not like two gymnasts are like doing kung fu fighting on the trampoline. They do their little routine and the judges rate them, and then whoever gets the higher score wins. Those are the sports where women excel at, because there's no direct competition. The size and strength of your opponent isn't a factor, but your flexibility can be showcased without some sort of disparity between size or strength. So it's not that women can't be athletes, it's that their bodies are just simply different. They're built to do certain things, and men are built to do certain things. When you make a sports league and fill it with women, they're going to compete at a level that isn't entertaining. People go and pay to see athletes because the level of their skill is so far beyond what they would see, just going to a neighborhood game. You and your buddies can play football at a grass field, and that's not like watching an NFL game. When you're watching athletes perform who are at the top of the class, it's just entertaining to see that competition at that level. When you see women try to do that, women playing sports that are built for men, it's just sad, because they have the strength and skill of like a high school boy. And that's not because they don't train hard, it's just because their bodies aren't built for it.
It's like, I enjoy doing yoga, which I'll admit most women are better at than men, but I'm not in a position where I can go, oh, I can pretty much make a career out of this, because there's not a lot of guys that do it. So in order to make it to the professional field as a guy, I don't have to have the same skill level as the professional females. So like what you're watching is subpar athletes, really. You're watching B, C grade athletes, and I pretty much consider it a kind of like affirmative action where these women are getting paid millions of dollars to do work at a lower standard than what most men could do, just because the fact that they're women.
Sorry. Yeah, I think what women need to do is stop trying to be men. Like, that is the problem with feminism. It's not that, the man-hating and all that, that's fairly recent, but it's all been built from the first wave about women trying to be men. And women are not men. And I understand that, the differences, we're more alike than we're different, but we're different enough that the differences are stark when you actually get to the functions of a man and a woman. And it doesn't mean women should be barefoot and pregnant or chained to a bed or something like that. I mean, you don't have to abuse someone to understand and appreciate that, there's a hierarchy. Like I always come back to children. Whenever people accuse me of being a misogynist and all that stuff, or especially when I talk about taking away women's right to vote, I bring up children, because children can't vote, but they have rights, they're protected, You can't just enslave children. You can't abuse children. Just because they don't have all the rights of an adult doesn't mean they don't have rights at all. Doesn't mean they're not respected as human beings, outside of abortion, obviously. So when you talk about the differences between men and women, it really just comes down to that an acknowledgement of the biological realities of these differences and their implications. And this is where I didn't really actually start as an anti-egalitarian when I first kind of started my MGTOW journey. I came to that conclusion the more I thought about it, the more I looked at the issues and thought about the implications. And what it really comes down to is this cult, this religion of egalitarianism, and it doesn't just affect, it doesn't just affect feminism. Feminism is just one manifestation. You also see egalitarianism in the men's rights movement. You see it with traditionalists. They're all trying to fight for this phantom equality. Like, feminism's wrong, we just need the sexes to be equal. The sexes can never be equal. They are just too fundamentally different. This whole myth, like I was talking to a friend of mine who's married, and he even admitted that this whole concept of an equal partnership between a man and a woman is total bullshit. Someone always has to wear the pants. And you're either the man wearing the pants and the woman is following you, or you're an emasculated bitch and the woman is a dominating cunt that just controls the marriage. There is no such thing as this equal partnership, and we're all just equal. It's one or the other.
Yeah. What I've noticed, like with all of the women I've dated, right, is I've pretty much only managed to date girls for more than a week or two if I have a job. Usually I have a car, but I've always had a vehicle because I don't have a car now. I've still got a scooter. And whenever I start to date girls, they always have no job and no car. And what I used to think this was a result of just them having a bit more spare time, not being as stressed out, so they're a bit better to be around. But it's actually more or less to do with hypergamy, because if they did have a job and a car, they'd probably go for a guy that has a boat and a 9-to-5 full-time job and more money. So I used to think that I was the one making this decision, but no, it's actually them. So I originally, I just hated the idea of hypergamy. I still don't really like it that much. But what I consider it more now is like, well, whatever it exists, as long as you control what you give women in exchange for their time, I think as long as it's voluntary, then it's okay. So that to me is like the the relationship style where the man is in control. And what happens with marriage and de facto relationships is that the government steps in and gives leverage to the women through the legal system, where it says no, she's in control of what you give her. So they're trying to create equality by force through what is pretty much just like a form of violence. If you don't abide by these rules, we will take by force your things and give it to this other person without your consent. So something that your channel has really helped me see is the fallacy of the ideal of equality. I still think that in terms of an economic sense, that 1% of the population having access to 90% of the world's resources is unsustainable, inefficient, and socially destructive. But I recognize that equality is essentially like an infinite, unachievable ideal, and not necessarily always the best option in certain circumstances, like relationships where women want a strong man to be making decisions, and when they start to have more authority, they're unsatisfied, more likely to cheat, more likely to take your stuff, and be a complete act like a child, like you were saying before. They'll have tantrums and just feel all around insecure in that relationship.
Yeah, what's funny is it all started with this whole push for equality actually started in the 1900s when the ball, the ball was really dropped in 1920 when women were given the right to vote. But it started actually with the Protestant Reformation, because prior to the Protestant Reformation, women were not educated. They were basically expected to just be kind of almost domestic servants to their husbands or fathers, depending on whether they were married. And if you wanted to be educated, this is actually brilliant. I'm actually thinking about doing a video called Great Moments in Patriarchy, where I talk about the brilliance of nuns. Because if you wanted to be educated as a woman, you had to take vows of chastity and poverty, which is brilliant, because you basically, in order to have the knowledge and the weapons in order to exercise your hypergamy, you had to take vows not to exercise your hypergamy, which is just, it's so genius. It has to be divinely inspired. But with the Protestant Reformation, because obviously nuns aren't mentioned in the Bible, and the Protestants were very adamant on it has to be in the Bible or it's not part of the church, because that was considered like a traditional thing. So they got rid of the nuns, they got rid of the monks and all that stuff, and they started generally educating women. And the idea was we're going to generally educate women so they could teach the church, principles to their children in their home. They don't have to send their kids off to be educated by nuns. The mothers will directly educate the children. But when they did that, within one generation, it was within a century, you started having female writers, basically, who were the first mothers of feminism. Now that they were educated, now they were like, no, this is, women should have equal rights, they should be equal to this, equal equality, equality, equality. And those writings of these early feminists is what set the foundation of the feminist movement. And then, we're now on wave 3, and you can see all the damage it's caused.
So I watched this interesting video this morning by TLDR, and what it really showed is like what third wave feminism has become is where women are so irresponsible. They don't want to take on any responsibility for the way they act, for the way they treat men, for the way they perceive men. They want to blame men for everything. So women are becoming increasingly hostile. It's not just a result of feminism, but feminism definitely is a bit more fuel in that fire. They spark these behavioral tendencies and values that women have, which makes men want to increasingly detached from engaging with women unnecessarily. So there was this video that TLDR made about sex bots, about how men have now created sex robots, and feminists, who are probably one of the demographics on the planet that use dildos more frequently than any other demographic, are complaining that these objects, these inventions are objectifying women, they're insulting to women and children, and blah, blah, blah. And the irony of all of this is that it is feminism, this, or whatever you want to call it, this attitude that feminism promotes, that has encouraged men to resort to inventing fuck toys instead of actually having sex with women in the first place. So because women are so hostile and unfeminine and increasingly less attractive to men, men have taken it on their own devices to invent these substitutes for female companionship, and then instead of taking responsibility for looking at themselves and saying, oh well, why would a guy want to hang around with a person who's a complete bitch and is going to take half of your money, use you as a financial resource, and then spit you out and blame everything on you? Why would men want to engage with people like that? No, they just blame men once again.
Yeah, what's really sad is that, there have been blow-up dolls and sex dolls and, mannequins. They've been around for decades, and women have never felt threatened. This is what's really tragically sad. The point of the sex bot isn't just to have sex with something that feels and looks like a human woman, because you can already do that now. You could buy some doll that, that looks and feels like a woman. You turn the lights off, it as a whole, you go to town. The sex bot, it's because it responds like a real woman. It has a voice, even if it sounds a little bit like razor blade candy. It talks, it interacts. It's not sex that men want. They want that companionship and that intimacy. And that's like the last thing that women can dangle in front of men and say, you know, we have what you want, you need to do what we want to get it, type of thing. And, you know, it's never been a good deal. There's a reason why nature gave men such a powerful sex drive, because nature understood, just, you know, in order to keep the species going, men had to have a more powerful incentive to deal with women. Because you look at children before they hit puberty, boys and girls want nothing to do with each other. Boys are doing their thing, girls are doing their thing, and if it wasn't for the sex drive, the sexes wouldn't have anything to do with each other. So
I kind of like, yeah, I agree with you in general there. But when I was like 4 to about 6 years old, I was pretty much only friends with females. Like probably like 80-90% of my friends were females. I just like, I didn't really consider myself, you know, like one of the guys or one of the girls. Just kind of like talking to people that I found interesting, and so on. And then what I found is like school kind of pushes that idea that, you know, boys, you hang around with boys, girls, you hang around with girls, to the point that like I found it strange. And then like I found it, oh, it's cool to like, you know, hang around with guys and not girls. So then I became like, you know, a bit more balanced and mostly hung around the guys. But like definitely like before puberty, I think that like the differences between females and males are fairly small. But yeah, I'm sure there's probably a few.
I was friends with girls too. They were like the tomboys, you know, the girls that wore, you know, just normal clothes. You almost couldn't tell they were girls if they didn't have long hair, type of thing. But you know, they just did stuff. We had sword fights with sticks and played tag and all the little kid stuff. Good times.
Yeah, the ones that you could play with without making them cry, pretty much, because the girly girls, you know, when you're that age, they would cry at any kind of, you know, attempted play that boys would usually engage.
Yeah, and it was usually, I didn't even think about this at the time, the girls that were a little bit tomboyish tended to have, you know, some kind of male role model. Either they had their biological father in their life, or they had like a really good stepdad that was a good role model to them. And so, I don't know, they were like a daddy's girl type of person. Whereas when you have the girly girls that did their own thing, and you know, all boys had cooties and stuff like that, they were usually didn't have any male role models. And I actually see this in a lot of the anti-feminist kind of honey badger women that you see kind of floating around the manosphere. They usually have really good relationships with their fathers. And I think that is one of the lasting legacies of feminism, is just this epidemic of single mothers and all of the damage that it does to society.
Yeah, it's so overlooked as well, because those statistics are fairly mind-blowing. You know, I'm sure you've heard them all, like 80% of, you know, youth in prison are from single mother homes, blah, blah, blah. And like, yeah, they all, like, you came from a single mother home, and obviously you've turned out okay, but like not everyone is in the exact same situation. And in general, it's something that society probably shouldn't encourage too much.
No, well, I mean, it messed me up for years. I kind of I grew through it, but it was in spite of everything. Like, and some of my siblings that were raised in the same environment have completely destroyed their lives. So it wasn't, you know, it was basically almost sheer luck. If things hadn't happened for me, you know, almost Deus ex machina, I would have I could be dead, I could be in jail. It's just one of those things where things just happened to me that kind of helped me out of that situation. But yeah, it's basically it was just a freak accident. Those environments are so bad, and they do so much damage. I can't, like, just to give you a taste of how bad this environment is. So I was in the military, and I was deployed to Iraq twice, and I never really got PTSD. I only, I saw some stuff, but it never really messed me up. But I knew people who, they were really messed up, because they saw some stuff. And but it just, I don't know, I just processed it better, and it just never was an issue with me. However, when my mother abandoned me, and that messed me up so much that I actually suppressed the memory, and I had like a false memory, and I used to actually believe it. And it wasn't until I went over the story with my grandma years later that she told me that's not what happened. And when she told me what really happened, the actual memory came flooding back to me that my mind had suppressed through my childhood into adulthood. I'd like successfully suppressed. That's how traumatic it was. So
Yeah, well, so it's pretty amazing. It's like it's just as, or in your case, more traumatizing than going to war, than to have I guess a kind of be in a situation where your mother is like abusive or neglectful. Whereas like in this culture that we have, like all single mothers essentially, even if they are that way, are constantly given positive social feedback. You go girl, you're doing the hardest job in the world. And there's very little criticism of single mothers and the destruction that they cause. It's always just placed on the men.
Well, it's the problem is what's the alternative? You have all these single mothers. Let's say there's a big movement to end single motherhood. Okay, what are you going to do with all these kids? You're going to take them away from their mother, and who's going to raise them? So,
yeah, that's the thing. What I think like people should do in general on the aggregate is to stop having kids, particularly in the numbers that they are, because like the economy is becoming increasingly detached from the need for manpower or manual labor. There's growing unemployment. Humans are using the resources of the planet at a rate that is unrenewable. The world can't renew enough resources for us to keep consuming at these rates. So like that's one of the reasons I'm glad like traditionalism and the concept of the worker drone male life is collapsing, and people are kind of waking up to it, because like the idea that we should all have children, we should all reproduce at an exponential rate. I don't think that's exactly something that's natural besides our sex drive. But now we have contraception, obviously. And the reason I think it's perpetuated is just so that the current governments can keep taxing people, so that there's a certain amount of scarcity, so that people are still able to be controlled and put into these kind of covert slavery roles where they're essentially being exploited for their utility. They have to like in your case join the army in order to get a paycheck, to be subservient to the people that do have the actual authority in society.
Yeah, it really comes down to, the government and society grow from one another. Like, if you really want to understand society, you really just have to look at the family. Like, from the family, which is basically from the sexual relationship between men and women. So you have a man and a woman, they come together to have a sexual relationship, and you have a family. From that family comes the tribe. From the tribe comes everything, a society, a government. Everything comes from the family and the dynamics within that family. So it's really not hard to understand society or human nature just by understanding these dynamics. And they're so fundamental, they're so easy. Like, you don't even need to look at humans, you can just look at animals, like my video about animal ecology. where it talks about, females choosing their mates based on the protection or the amount of food that they have access to. I mean, these animals exhibit hypergamy. And so it can't be social. It can't be like, oh, it's feminism's fault. Like, how are all these animals doing it? I mean, this is an ingrained evolutionary survival mechanism. And it's not necessarily evil. It's basically tied to the maternal instincts. A mother instinctively wants to provide the best environment for her children. And she needs a lot of resources because when she's pregnant and nursing, she can't hunt for herself. She's vulnerable to predators. She requires a man to protect her from threats and to provide her with food. And then the other thing is the reason why hypergamy kind of develops the way it does, where women can bounce from one relationship to the other when they find the better deal, is because in a lot of animal species, when one male is overthrown by another male, the new alpha will murder the children of the previous male because he doesn't want the children of the previous male in his territory. He'll keep the women, but he'll kill the children of the previous male. So if the children aren't old enough to be independent and run away, they're going to get murdered. So it was in her interests to trade up as soon as possible, because if she were to stay with a less dominant beta male, then her children would die. So it was in the survival of the species' interest for her to be hypergamous. So the whole, you got to take the morality out of it. Yes, it is selfish, and it's bad. What makes it bad is when women try to get the guy to commit, and then they use hypergamy later. Like, they want it both ways. Like the whole thing about the woman who has the open marriage, but she's the one having sex with other men while the guy stays home and takes care of the kids, and she's just out getting dicked down. And she's basically looking for a man to replace her husband, but he doesn't know. He thinks they have this beautiful open marriage, and she's just getting her groove on or whatever, but she's actually looking for a better man. And there's actually a recent video from Stefan Molyneux. I just happened to catch it the other day, and it was the same concept. This couple called in talking about the woman wanted to have polyamory. She wanted to be able to have sex with other men. The guy didn't want to. He was fine with her, but she wanted to have sex with other men because she thought he could do better, or she thought she could do better than him. And that's when it gets immoral. Because, if you just look at animals, there's no morality in animals. Animals just live off instinct. The only metric is success, survival and reproductive success.
The only reason I would say that would be immoral, though, is because the guy doesn't agree to it, right? Because I've had relationships with girls, I kind of do at the moment, where we're both neither of us are monogamous, so it's kind of and the reason I can do this is because I fundamentally believe that there is zero potential for long-term companionship with all women. So I just see all relationships as temporal, sexually oriented, brief moments that you see another person. Whereas the idea of monogamy, there's more of a emotional attachment. So there is that level of betrayal where it does become increasingly immoral.
Yeah, it's the fraud. It's not necessarily the hypergamy that's the problem. It's the fraud of wanting commitment from a man and then being hypergamous as well. So if you just want to be swingers, where you and your the wife and the husband go to these swingers parties and just swap spouses and have sex with other people, and both of them are having sex with other people equally, whatever. If that's how you like to get down, get down. But with this whole one-sided open marriage, where the woman wants to go have sex with other men, and it's always a woman who's in her sexual marketplace prime. She's young, she's in her 20s or early 30s, and she's going out and getting a dick, and it's because she's trying to get a better deal than who she's with, and the guy isn't on board with this. He's not like, oh yeah, I'm going to get lots of pussy on the side too, because in every case, well, not every case, I don't know that many cases, but I'm assuming, based on my hunch and evidence, that women, if she knew she couldn't do better than the guy, she wouldn't even suggest an open marriage. In fact, if the guy was rich or extremely attractive or something like that, she would not even suggest an open marriage because she'd be worried about him doing better than her. The only reason why she would suggest an open marriage or an open relationship is because she thinks she can do better than him. And because she's still young and attractive, and because a woman doesn't have to bring anything to the table other than sex. But she knows she has to use sex in order to attract a better man. If she's in a relationship with a guy, and she meets a guy that she thinks is better than her current boyfriend or husband, but sex is off the table, she's never going to be able to land that guy. She has to use sex to attract that guy, or at least the promise of sex. So that's why the open marriage relationship is important to her. To the guy, it's really not that important. Women aren't attracted to a man unless he's like, I don't know, like extremely good looking. I'm not even sure even that works. That only works with like really young women who are only interested in just casual sex and aren't interested in anything serious. But most women, especially as they get older and start looking for something serious, they will judge a man by what he offers her, in material. So you could be an extremely good-looking guy. You could have like a 12-inch dick, but if you're like, yeah, I'm already married, but I'm a swinger, I want to have sex, a woman's gonna be like, yeah, you're really hot, you have a huge dick, but I'm not going to get anything out of you, so I'm not interested in sex. I mean, maybe you'll do it in the bathroom just so she can experience your girth. But for the most part, women are only interested in a man sexually if there's something she can get out of him. So that's why, open marriages never benefit the man. The woman's going to get like a dick a day, but the guy, he may get like, I don't know, some woman who's got like a sexless marriage or something that they meet on that what's that Ashley Madison website. They might hook up, and that'll be the extent of his foray in affairs while his wife's getting the train run on her. So
yeah, the idea of a man, especially in a open marriage, is just so contradictory to me. Like, what is the point of even getting married if you're gonna be swingers? All you're pretty much doing there is setting up for self-destruction so that the woman can run off with your assets, rinse and repeat. I don't get it. Like, I'm happy to like see girls casually like that, but God no, like even if I did still think marriage was a viable relationship framework, I still wouldn't consider it to be as an open relationship. That's for sure.
yeah, I mean, I don't understand the mindset personally. I can appreciate the desire for variety, but yeah, the risks, especially to the man. I mean, you're married, like if you get divorced, it's not going to be a good day for you. Why would you introduce this element that's going to virtually guarantee that it's going to fall apart? I mean, unless you get some ironclad prenup that protects you or something, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I think what it is the men who agree to these relationships, and from what I've read, and this may not be true, but from what I've read, I think the most of these people who are in these open relationships, one party or the other is not really in favor of it, but they're willing to go along with it. So either, and it usually is the party that believes that they can't do better. So if it's the man is, dating a woman who's perceivably more attractive than he thinks he could get. So like if you're just a 5, like I don't know, based on different sexual marketplace value, if you're a guy who's essentially a 5, you have an average job, average looks, that kind of thing, and you're dating an 8 or a 9, and she tells you she wants to have an open relationship, you're just happy to have sex with an 8 and a 9. You're not going to complain. Even if she's getting dicked down by other guys, you're like, hey, you know what? I'm still getting a piece now and again, and I'm a 5 and she's a 9. However, if you were a 9 and she were a 9, you wouldn't tolerate an open relationship. You're like, fuck you. Get the fuck out. Like, I'm not letting you have sex with other men. Are you crazy? And it's because you could do just as good or better than her. So it really comes down to there's one party that's basically being exploited, and it's usually the man. And it's just because the woman doesn't have to work that hard to get attention from other men. whereas the man usually has to bring something to the table. And if he's already married, any woman who isn't just a complete nympho is going to see that his resources are already tied up with his wife and his family, and he has nothing to offer her other than meaningless sex, which women tend to not be that interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I see it the other way as well. Like, if I was seeing a girl that was like, a 9, and had a good personality, was like, the best I could do, I probably in that situation would be less likely to want to have a kind of open relationship with her, because the only way I could do that with the girl is if I would consider, I can, do this well again fairly easily. I don't have a strong emotional connection. But if I met a girl that I actually liked, that was really attractive, and then she wanted to go bang other dudes and let me bang other girls, I'd probably kind of like think that's a raw deal for me, because I'm probably not going to get any better than her. Hypothetically, of course, I probably, I don't really have that that kind of like idealization of girls anymore. But back in the day, I definitely did. And like what I consider right is, like, I used to think that the guys that would have sex with girls that are in relationships, that they're like horrible people. But like I'm getting like increasingly less empathetic for guys that are just so willing to put their heads on the chopping block just to get some female validation, that like you really have to wonder, these guys are pretty much asking for it. It's almost kind of like if you want to be like dominated by a female, that's what you do. You get married, you become a financial utility, and she has all of the power over you. Like, why would anyone want to do that in the first place? And I see marriage as like a fairly interesting thing. I used to think that I would get married one day. I used to kind of have it in the back of my mind, never really thought about it too much. But I used to think it was more of like a religious ideal, and a form of contraception, which I still think it is on some level, but more so than that, it's just a freaking business. It's a business opportunity for the people that sell diamonds, for people that do wedding photography, etc. And it's a business for the women who use it as a way to secure resources without having to do very much work.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, modern marriage. I mean, what does the man get out of it? It's a complete raw deal. But you have to remember that you don't need marriage to have families. Animals have no concept of religion or government or marriage, and they have families. And what's interesting is, in the absence of all these external powers imposing, laws regarding marriage, the woman has to make sure that she keeps her man happy. Like, obviously, a woman needs a man for resources, for protection, for utility, all that stuff. But if she's not bringing something that's enhancing his life, I'm not talking about being equal, like bringing enough to the table, like 50%, but she has to bring enough to the table to justify his sacrifice for her. So if the man is doing all these things for the woman, protecting her, providing for her, working for her, I'm just talking animals, I'm not even talking humans, she has to basically take care of his needs. If she pulls any feminist shit, she's going to starve to death. So it's a naturally self-regulating. So what it really comes down to, the reason why modern marriage is so bad, the reason it sounds like, I'm not scapegoating all on feminism. Feminism is just a symptom, but it's really this need to make women and men equal, which is completely contradictory to nature. But feminism is just a manifestation of that. But what it's done is,
well, I think this is interesting again, in terms of our culture that's based around consumption, is because let's put it this way, men and women, they desire each other on some level, and when they are deprived of that, it creates a good environment for people to be consumers, because you have guys that are going out, they're spending more money to attract hypergamous women, because knowing that the price of attracting a decent woman is becoming higher and higher, and they have to show that they have lots of resources, or imply that they have more resources than they actually do. And then you have women that will go out and spend lots of money on clothes, on fashion, trying to attract those high status males that, you know, they may or may not be able to find. So it's essentially like getting us to behave in ways that, you know, creates more jobs, creates more consumption, essentially just keeps people like on the treadmill doing things in order to please the opposite sex. Because, like, you know, like I like how you put it in your last video, like men are deprived of this particular need to essentially just be accepted as humans. They're always trying to prove themselves, where it's like been referred to male mother need in the past. I think you and I both agree that it's not necessarily to do anything to do with your mother. It's just men wanting to be treated as humans instead of utilities.
Yeah, well, it's more about being able to let your guard down. You know, when as men, you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you have to be stoic, because everybody looks to you for strength. You know, it could be your family, it can be just people in society. When it's like, when something's going on, people look to the man. I mean, it doesn't matter what, it could be strangers. There could be like a fire, and someone could be like, help my baby, and they're going to look around and they're going to find some man, and they're going to be like, you're a man, you need to help her. And, you know, like, if you don't, you're like, oh, you're a coward. Like, they use shame to try to keep men in this role where they're not allowed to show any weakness, they're not allowed to show fear, or they're not a real man, they're a pussy, they're gay, whatever. And just this, you know, it's a lot of pressure, and men just walk. And men, I'm not saying you need to walk around through life crying and, you know, whatever. I'm just saying that men need a place to let their guard down. You know, you can't. It's like tensing a muscle. You can't just have a muscle tense 24/7. You have to relax at some point. And I think this is why a lot of men go to therapists, and they spend thousands of dollars talking to these overpriced, you know, liberal arts majors who just have someone to talk to and let their guard down without the fear of being judged or without the fear of it getting around to other people. You know, they pay thousands of dollars for this. It's almost like almost like an emotional prostitute. Just
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what motivates me to make videos, really, is like I want, you know, my perspective to be understood and appreciated. I can't find that in physical reality with friends or with girls, because like when I try to talk about this kind of stuff or anything that has like deep meaning in terms of human values and cultural biases, when I bring these things up, I'm just attacked brutally by, you know, with like, if you have like friends that are like fairly lighthearted, fun to be around, and like people that you wouldn't expect to like become angry and enraged, try and bring something like, you know, the topic of gynocentrism up, and you'll see a completely new side. And you'll just essentially you know, you'll get like no sympathy, no empathy. You will, like, I have a few friends that I in real life that I can talk to about these things, definitely. But like most people, they're just not open to accepting the male perspective, which is really what MGTOW is trying to do. I guess like with a collective ideology of what it means to be a man in this time. And, you know, like you bring up these ideas with people, and they ridicule you. Just last week, you know, I brought up the idea of white privilege to this black feminist girl, and she lost her shit, something like you wouldn't believe. Like she sounded like Big Red almost, saying, you know, shut the fuck up, like going absolutely off her tee. And that's when guys, like a lot of other guys, would, you know, lose their temper and get mad. But I guess like I'm so desensitized to people just like having emotional tirades now that when I see it in real life, I kind of like I don't really feel a strong emotion. I don't take it personally. I know that like I'm triggering emotions in this person. That's based on their insecurities. It's nothing to do with me being a bad person, me being a cunt, me being like an insensitive prick or whatever, like whatever type of shaming language that they want to use. It's to do with somebody else not wanting to listen to facts, to reality, and what MGTOW does, well, why it evokes those emotions in people, is because it just challenges the worldview that they've been spoon-fed for so long, that tells them that women are beyond criticism.
Well, it's a lot of times the traditionalists, especially when you talk about race or nationality, men, especially traditionalist men, are willing to accept this terrible deal that is modern relationships and the feminist society that we live in, because, you know, they're doing it for the children, they're doing it for their race, they're doing it for their nation. They have to like outbreed the other people, or it's going to be this and that. And my answer to that is, what have white people done for you? I mean, like you personally, when have white people gotten together and actually like done shit that benefited your life? Why do you care so much about the white race? Like, you're not going to change races tomorrow. You're not like going to wake up tomorrow with vastly different colored skin unless you go to like a tanning salon like regularly. So you're not going to change your race. Your IQ isn't going to change. Your genes aren't going to change. Your life is your life. You don't owe anything to your race. You don't owe anything to anyone else. You don't owe anything to your country or your nation. This is all just, it's all an illusion. I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
It's tribalism, isn't it? Tribalism.
Yeah, it's the matrix of tribalism. They're sacrificing their lives to this group that gives nothing back. And it's fine if you, I'm not saying in my tribalism videos, I'm not talking about like being a lone wolf and not having any associations, but you need to question them. What is this association giving to me? If it's giving something tangible, some benefit to you, then great. But if it's not, if you're just sacrificing yourself for some intangible concept like race or nation or whatever, and you're getting nothing in return back, why are you doing that? It just makes no sense. But these traditionalist men are so willing to sacrifice themselves for the white people or for America or whatever. Like, they're just willing to fall on the sword, and they're willing to be the utilities of women. They're willing to be destroyed in divorce court, just to like put some more white people in the gene pool to outbreed people that they think are going to take over. So it's so stupid, and it's like,
it's not like you know, male mother need. It's men needing to be they want to feel accepted. So they get married. They want to be accepted by women. They you know, they take pride in their race or their nation. And where I see it most in Australia is with sports teams. People just like act like, you know, the local sports team is an extension of them, and they use it sort of vicariously through other people, where at the end of the day, all they're doing themselves is sitting down. And I'm not against like people enjoying sports. I'm just against the idea of people, you know, becoming so obsessed with sports to the extent that they think they're achieving what the other people are achieving. And I think that sport is very much used in a way to direct male energy, you know, that force of intent of wanting to be great, and they're directing it to a way that is not threatening to the existing political hierarchy, economic hierarchy, the existing culture. Sports directs masculinity into a way that can be controlled, regulated, and essentially just like, you know, all the energy that men spend becoming obsessed with sports is pretty much energy almost down the toilet, where if they were directing that energy elsewhere, you know, people that are currently in power probably wouldn't be for much longer.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that deep. I don't think it's like a conscious conspiracy. I think we're social creatures. We want to belong to groups. We like to group up. And, you know, things like sports, things like race, and we have an ingrained part of our evolutionary kind of upbringing and traits is we tend to have an affinity to people that look like us. And this is kind of the concept of race. You know, if you look like us, and that's because, if there's a genetic familiarity, then, you know, you're in. So, you know, animals that look like each other, they just, whether or not they're related or not, there's just like an instinct that, oh, you must be closely related to me because you look like me, and so I like you because you're like me. And that's kind of, that can obviously take forms. You have racism, stuff like that. But I'm also saying that, you know, you see people wearing this, like if you go somewhere where a certain sports team is just idolized. So like, let's say you don't give a crap about hockey, but you go to some town where everybody loves this one hockey team. And so you see everybody wearing the jerseys, everybody's got the license plates, everyone's got like the memorabilia all over the restaurants and the businesses, and everybody's just all about the sports team. You are going to catch that bug sooner or later because you're going to want to be part of the group. There's just this pull to be part of the in crowd. You don't want to be left out. And this is exploited in politics. This is where people use social proof, or they use this idea. This really works great on women. This is like one of these little like mind fuck things you could do with women. If you notice with music videos or any sort of product, they always have women, and they're actresses obviously, but they make them seem like they're just average women. Like you see a music video where it has like a boy band singing and dancing. In the music video, they'll have them doing a concert, and they'll have these women crying and like reaching out to them, and it's all staged, it's all choreographed, but that communicates to the girls watching the music video that these other women think these men are very desirable. Now I think they're desirable too because I want to be part of the group. And you can actually do this if you want to really fuck with women. What you do is you can go to a club and you can hire like really beautiful like dancers or strippers or whatever just to come to the club and flirt with you. And you could be like, you know, a regular looking guy, whatever. So you just hire these very attractive women just to flirt with you and hang on you. And lo and behold, all the attractive women in the club will start flirting with you too.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like women will find whoever the media tells them to find attractive. You know, a few years ago, it was vampires, which worked pretty well for me because I've got pale skin and dark hair. So you know, there's girls that will just find guys attractive based on what they're told, almost like it's a form of fashion to find a certain strata of masculinity hot. Like now we've got the lumbersexuals with the long beards, the wax chests, and you know the checkered shirts, and the really well groomed hair and moustaches. And you know they essentially will just follow the herd in terms of popularity as to what they find attractive. And I've used this to my advantage before, where like you know you just start taking selfies with hot girls or whatever, and then other girls will start looking at you. I only did that like once as like a bit of an experiment, but you know you get the point. And it's bizarre because like if a girl was doing that, I don't think it would necessarily work on guys the same way whatsoever.
No, it doesn't work on guys because guys are competitive by nature, where women are cooperative by nature. And I don't mean necessarily cooperative with men; they're cooperative with each other. So when they see other women doing something, and this is why in the commercial, just watch. I know you got rid of your TV. I don't know. Watch some YouTube ads, And you see commercials targeted to women will have women talking or interacting. It won't just be the product. And a commercial geared towards men will show the product and it will list the benefits of the product. That's how you know it's geared towards men. When it's geared towards women, you'll have people talking about the product and talking about how great it is.
So I'm not too sure what's happening, if you're there or not. I'm not sure if Turd Fling Monkey's cut off. Appears like he's still in the group, but I can't hear him at all. If you can hear me, just leave a message down the bottom in the text, something. Okay, so I'll probably maybe wait a few minutes, maybe the internet, dropped out on his end. Here he is on Skype. See if we can get him back. All right.
Hello?
Hey, back in action.
I don't know what happened. Like I was talking, and all of a sudden I saw my browser open up. I'm like, what happened? Was it me or was it you or what happened?
Well, I don't know. My internet connection here is okay at the moment, but yeah, it could have been either of us. I don't know.
Okay. I don't whatever. We could switch subjects. You said you want to talk about economics, or you want to talk about the. I guess we did kind of already talk about the whole vulnerability need.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's one of the reasons I became interested in MGTOWs, because my interest in economics, the use of money, and how it is essentially becoming less and less of a actual economy in the most definitive sense of the word. What I see money as now is more of a hierarchical system, more of a ideology than a form, than a tool that actually distributes resources and human potential in the most efficient way that we can. So I guess my journey into MGTOW is like, I found out that women make up 85% of consumer purchases, which I found extremely interesting. And then you notice how, most of the shops directed towards women. I noticed how most of the productive roles, the things that actually people actually have to do in order to survive, like, build infrastructure, all of these things are done by men, and they're relatively low paying. And then you can have like female models making millions of dollars, pretty much just like standing there to have their photos taken. So, and to bring this in from another level, like you have the idea of feminism trying to get more women in the workplace. And both of these things I see, like the use of money, as well as the idea of feminism and affirmative action, both of these things are detrimental to the ideal of meritocracy, where people are given certain roles in society based on their skill level. and rewarded proportionally. So you've got like Justin Bieber, who is multi-millionaire for simply singing a few songs. Then you have like the person who invented the internet, and I'm pretty sure he didn't make any or no money or minimal money from that invention. So the idea that like money incentivizes productivity is one of the reasons I started becoming interested in MGTOW content, which is like when I created like a video called like the gynocentric growth economy. I discussed how women are used to generate consumers to buy all these crap, all this useless crap that you don't need, and to incentivize men to buy symbolic items that portray status to women, that say, I'm a high status male, bear my children, essentially. So yeah, I think like your videos on economics, most of them seem like fairly spot on. I think like maybe where I tend to disagree with most people is that I don't think that money, the amount of money that you earn is proportional to how much effort or productivity you're actually expending.
No, yeah, I mean, what you're describing is a very common. I wouldn't even call it a fallacy. It's just a perspective. So let me explain, because you're not the first person who I've talked to regarding that viewpoint. So you don't get paid based on how hard you work or how important the job is. Like picking up trash, like picking up the trash once a week and going around in your dump truck. It's very important work. Nobody wants trash to pile up in front of their house, but garbage men get paid shit because it's not based on how hard it is or how important it is. It's based on two things: the value of the product, how much money the product earns, or how much it sells for, and how scarce the skills are to produce the product. So, for example, if I'm producing cheeseburgers that cost $1, you're not going to pay me much because the cheeseburgers are only $1. So I'm only producing so much value. So my job is only going to be worth so much. Also, it doesn't take a lot of skill or training to create someone who can create a cheeseburger. Almost anybody, you don't even have to speak English, you can make a cheeseburger. So the skills aren't scarce and the product isn't that valuable. Thus, fast food workers get paid shit. And then even people who dig ditches, like very hard work. I would not want to dig a ditch all day. Digging a ditch doesn't take a lot of skill, and it doesn't produce a lot of value. Like, how much would you pay someone to dig a ditch? Probably not a lot. So it's not producing a lot of value, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not a scarce skill set. So now let's talk about celebrities. The reason why celebrities make a lot of money and they get paid a lot of money is because they are irreplaceable. If Justin Bieber got hit by a car, Justin Bieber is just gone. There's not going to be a new Justin Bieber. It's not like, oh, Justin Bieber is dead, so we promoted Andy to be the new Justin Bieber. There's just not going to be a Justin Bieber ever again. So because Justin Bieber is irreplaceable, he is worth infinitely more than the ditch digger or the burger flipper. Also, what he produces, the music he produces, makes millions of dollars. Millions of little girls buy his albums. Millions of gay men buy his albums. And because he produces millions of dollars, and because he is irreplaceable, he makes millions of dollars. If you produce something that doesn't make a lot of money and the skills are very common, you're not going to get paid crap. But it can also, now the flip side of that is something that requires a lot of skill or training, like being a doctor. It requires years of schooling and specialized training to be a doctor, especially a specialist in something like cardiology. So if you were a doctor, yeah, it's not necessarily, like the value of the skill isn't necessarily making a lot of money, but it's so hard to find a good cardiologist. Like, people will fly across the world. Like, they'll fly from Asia all the way to the United States because they want to be treated by a specific cardiologist because he's like the best in the world. And, like, if you have the money, you'll spend it to go talk to this guy and have him perform your operation. So because his skills are so scarce and in such demand, he gets paid millions of dollars. So it's a fallacy to think of it as as working hard. Yeah, men do this infrastructure work, and it's very hard work. It's backbreaking. It's dangerous, and they don't get compensated. Just like, teaching is a very important job. Being a garbage man is a very important job. It doesn't matter. It's not how important the job is. It's how scarce the skills are and how much money the actual product produces. Like being a teacher, like how much is a preschool class worth? I mean, can you even put a price tag on it? I mean, obviously an education could be quote unquote priceless, but it's really not. There is a dollar value attached to an education, and thus there is a dollar value attached to a day of preschool. And so the amount that a preschool teacher is paid is a reflection of the value that she's creating for society and the specialized skills she brings to the table. But it's really not that hard to teach babies. So that's why preschool teachers don't make a lot of money, even if the work is important. So
And I don't disagree with like anything that you've said within that discussion there too much. But like what my point is that like money incentivizes people to pursue money for money's sake. So that like, for instance, we have these teachers that are teaching students to fill these cogs in a machine that is, driving off of the edge of a freaking cliff. So the way I see it as like what my point was before is that like money incentivizes people to do certain things that may or may not necessarily provide value. And although money has a degree of efficiency for servicing problems, like it's very good at getting people to come back to be treated. Like for example, like the medical establishment, that it is in their interests. Like the guy who recently hiked up the price of AIDS medication to $750 a pill from $7 or something. I thought that was like great because it like not. I don't think that was a great decision like morally, but it's a great business decision. It's a great business decision to allow more people to be affected by the HIV virus and extract more money from them, while letting the people who can't afford it just die off quicker, rather than the medical establishment actually doing what they're supposed to do, which is treat the public. Another example we get specifically in the medical industry is like how they go about treating cancer. Well, it's in their interest to want to give you chemotherapy, very specialized, it's hard to replace. Like you were saying before, it's fairly scarce. So people might fly all over the world to get certain chemotherapy treatments, as opposed to eliminating cancer through more preventative measures, like which is not really possible in a money system that puts everything into its own separate category, where like a more ideal way to treat cancer would be, say, to give them cheap pills, but one step beyond that would be, say, to give people the diets and lifestyles that prevent cancer from occurring in the first place.
all right, well, what you're describing isn't a failure of economics or a failure of money, it's a failure of government. So what you have is basically copyright patent law working in favor of pharmaceutical companies, where they are the only person allowed to produce a certain drug and they can control the price. They can charge whatever they want. Now there's a trade-off. So if you come down too hard on the pharmaceutical companies, where you basically disallow them from charging too much for their drugs, more than they think they should get. Like obviously, a drug company is going to want to get as much money as possible. If they could charge $1,000 a pill and people will pay it, they'll charge $1,000 a pill. And if you get in the way of that, they may not develop drugs in the future. So, I mean, it's fine to say, well, this person that invented the AIDS medicine is charging $750. That's bullshit. But would the world be better if that drug company never invented that AIDS medicine in the first place because there was no profit in them to do so? So, there's always two sides to it. I don't necessarily think there's an ultimate solution. I do think that, I think that we need to revisit the patent expiration, because usually once a drug has been on the market for a couple of years, the patent will expire and then you'll see generics come on the market. So what happens is during those first few years, the company that owns the patent will just charge an arm and a leg for this new wonder drug, and because they need to make back all the money they spend on research and development, because the generic drug companies don't have to spend any money. The drug's already been developed. They just have to copy once the patent expires, they just make generics, charge a fraction of the price, and they're good. So, I think the system works more or less good the way it is. I think it could be tweaked, but I don't necessarily think that's a problem with money. Now, what you're describing with the cancer treatment, where they are basically foregoing any sort of solution that involves nutrition or anything like that, that doesn't necessarily result in money being made, in favor of life-destroying chemotherapy or radiation, simply to line the pockets of the hospitals. That is really ultimately, if you really look at the how it breaks down, the hospitals, because the government forces them to give free health care to people who won't pay. Like, there are certain laws, I don't know how Australia works, but in the United States, there are certain laws where if someone shows up in an emergency room with a life-threatening thing, the hospital has to treat them. They can't turn them away, even if it's obvious they're not going to pay. They have no insurance. They have no reason to pay. They're just going to get free treatment and leave. But because we're a kind and gentle society, we have decided to make it a law that hospitals must treat people regardless of their ability to pay. So the hospitals have to make up the difference. So, for example, if you go to an emergency room in the U.S. and you just go get a Band-Aid, it's going to be like $500 for a Band-Aid. And the reason why they gouge you is if you have insurance, they need to gouge you to make up for the people who don't pay their bills. All the people who come into the emergency room and have no intention of paying their bills. So this distortion of the market by the government creates a system where the hospital has to make money off the people who can afford it. So it incentivizes.
I think the government might make these problems more obvious and exacerbate them, but like when you take it into like a different context, like at its core fundamental level, the idea of money is based on doing some kind of work, whatever it is, for income. So you have a lot of, you have some people that are core components in this economic system that are irreplaceable, whether it's for entertainment, for medical purposes, or whatever. But the vast majority of people are like doing, fairly basic tasks, repetitive tasks, that will eventually, are now being automated by technology, so that there's no, way for these people to earn money at an increasing rate. And like obviously, like self-driving cars are one of the main things that I think this illustrates very well. There's a video called "Humans Need Not Apply," which shows how these what they call Autobots, like self-driving cars, self-driving tractors. In Australia, there's going to be self-driving, 10-ton mining trucks and all this ridiculous equipment that will just be completely automated while being safer and more efficient. That are just like, in many ways, the idea of technology is to reduce the amount of human labor and effort required to get a higher or better result. So the more technologically dependent we become, the less ways there are for the vast majority of people to make money, which means that they'll have less money to spend to essentially like give to rich people. So you get like, economic stagnation, which leads to financial crisis and all of that. So I don't really see how like the fundamental concepts of money can be sustained in an extremely technologically dependent society, which I think like should be the aim for people. Really, it should be the aim for people to work smarter so that we can work less, instead of having like a fairly dogmatic idea that working 40 hours a week is like just some kind of like arbitrary standard rule that we all adhere to.
Yeah, well, I mean, money's just paper, and we have inflation because we constantly print more money than we should. But ultimately, what defines growth in an economy is productivity. And automation and robotics and all this stuff absolutely skyrockets productivity. And just to give you an example, I mean, like 100, maybe 200 years ago, there was a trade of called cobblers. And these were men, but mostly men. I mean, there might have been a couple women, I don't know. But it was basically people who made shoes by hand. They would actually hand make the shoes. And shoes were so expensive that people basically owned one pair of shoes, and they couldn't afford to have multiple pairs of shoes. They'd have to go and get their shoes repaired by taking them to the cobbler, and he would have to get his little tacks and his nail, and he would have to like repair the shoe and put on a new heel. And they still have like shoe repair places, but I mean, it used to be like that's where you got your shoes. You'd get them made at the cobbler, and you'd have to get them repaired at the cobbler, and you'd have like one pair of shoes for your entire adult life. And by putting the cobbler out of business, by having basically the assembly line and people making shoes in mass, now shoes are not a big deal. I mean, you probably go through a pair of shoes a year, and you just throw them away without a second thought. The thought of getting your shoes repaired just never even enters your mind. Now, all these people who lost their job, all these cobblers who lost their job, were probably really pissed off when this happened. But you think of all the people whose lives have been infinitely better, like the fact that you can get a new pair of shoes, and look at how shoes have improved over the years, and now they're just more comfortable. There's all different styles and all this other great stuff. People's standard of living has been increased so many times over. And yeah, people are losing their jobs, but productivity is what defines growth. And it doesn't matter how little you get paid. It matters about your standard of living. For example, if I busted my ass for like 40 hours a week doing menial labor, like maybe work on a farm or working in a factory, and I got paid a decent wage, I had basically a guaranteed income. Maybe like the government passed a law saying you're never going to automate this, you're going to have this job for the rest of your life. Well, whoopee, I get to work in a factory for the rest of my life. So I'm working in my factory, I'm getting paid my money, but because everything's so expensive, I'm spending my money on most of my money is going to basic necessities. I don't have a lot of money to spend on entertainment. If you look at the figures, like 100 years ago, most of people's income went to food because it was expensive. And as we've basically moved from an agrarian kind of economy to a manufacturing and then to an information economy, people no longer work on farms. All these farm jobs are gone, or they're being done by Mexicans. So now what you have cheap food. Now Americans spend a fraction of their income on food. Most of their money is spent on entertainment. So our lives have been increased. Like people living in poverty in the United States have a standard of living that people in the middle class 50 years ago could only dream of. And people who
I think like no matter where like you are in like Western society, people don't generally spend the most on entertainment. They generally spend the most on property, on rent, having a house. So another good example of where I see money as being completely inefficient from an economical perspective, allocating resources where they're required, is in real estate. Like in the United States, there's more empty homes than homeless people, and the reason for this is because scarcity, whether it's environmentally required, whether like it's just part of like our environment, or if it's manufactured artificially by the need for it economically is what creates value. So that even though people have like landlords own multiple apartments or houses, they're essentially keeping them withheld in order to retain their value, kind of like a cartel. So essentially, like there's more empty homes than homeless people, which indicates that we're not allocating resources where they're required, essentially.
Well, that's based on it's a couple things. Like, we have certain zoning where we actually could create more housing if we wanted, but because of zoning, you can only build houses in certain areas. But the thing about, homeless people have no money. So the only way to put them in these empty houses would basically be to give them a free house. And then you have a bad incentive, because if you're giving homeless people free houses, what about the people who are almost homeless? The people who are like, maybe they're working 3 jobs, but they're just barely making it, but they're paying their rent. And they're like, whoa, you just gave Toothless Joe a free house because he was homeless while I'm busting my ass in 3 jobs. I want a free house. And then, now you got people quitting their jobs so they can be homeless so they can get a free house. And then it creates, and it sounds like a slippery slope fallacy, but it's really not. Once you start giving people free stuff, it just trickles down. The people who get the free stuff are happy, but then the people who are like, let's say you make the cutoff. All right, if you have $100 or less, you get a free house. But if you have $101, you don't get a free house. The people with 101 are going to be like, this is bullshit. I missed it by $1. And then they're going to want, okay, let's make it 150. Oh, well, I have $151. I want a free house. It just keeps snowballing until everybody basically demands a free house as a human right. Like, I have a right to a free house because I'm an American. And you just can't do that, because if you gave everyone a free house, you'd be stealing from the people who bought the land legitimately. And if you give people free, and they've done this with rent controls in cities and places that have done rent controls, like New York and San Francisco. The second the government imposes a rent control to try to make housing more affordable, or basically what a rent control is, if you're not familiar, is when they basically set aside certain apartments or whatever and say you cannot charge more than X. And it's to keep the rent affordable to low-income people. Kind of like we were talking about, like, people who normally can't, they don't give it to homeless people, but they allow poor people who normally couldn't afford to live in the city a way to live in the city by going into a rent control house. And every single time they do that, it creates shortages, because as soon as rent controls are imposed, the developers who would normally build these apartments and houses realize they can no longer make a profit. So they stop building, and now there's no houses. So you have to understand that there's always trade. That's the problem with economics. There's never like a right and a wrong. It's always about trade-offs. And it's usually a choice between a right and a right, or a good and a good. You have to basically prioritize, and someone's going to get hurt. Some good people are going to be hurt. So do you screw over the landowners and the developers who are going to stop building houses and you're going to have a housing shortage? Or do you basically allow them to charge what they want to earn a profit, but then some people are going to be homeless? Or some people are going to live in really shitty houses, and they could be living something better. There's all these trade-offs. Like, someone's going to be hurt. Good people are going to be hurt no matter what you do. And this is like the burden of leadership, like heavy is the head that wears the crown. If you are in charge of making these decisions, you're going to be directly responsible for hurting good people, because no matter what you do, someone's going to be hurt. And this is why
it's like a giant chain reaction, if like the idea of you getting a free home if you earn less than X amount, it reminds me of how in Australia, if you earn over a certain amount, you're taxed a shitload more than everyone else. So it creates like this reinforcement, right? That like my parents are married and only my dad works. And if my mum was to work, they would both go past this other threshold, which makes it so that they're getting taxed like 60% of their income or something ridiculous. which is like a complete demotivator for my mum to go get a job. So essentially, like you have all these different areas that is mostly based on the idea of money and tax, where these ideals as an incentive system don't really allocate resources efficiently on a large level. And when you try to make like incremental, micro regulations to address them, it kind of just has a domino effect, which is why I think like, I don't have the answer, but I think the whole ideology of having, taxes and using money, I just don't think that they're, going to be very efficient for much longer in terms of like, what do we do if like we have the potential to automate all these jobs, but these people need jobs. They just have to be doing something that a machine can do better so they can get a source of income, go home, watch The View, watch TV, watch Big Brother, go back to work the next day. Because if they didn't have that ideological security, if they didn't have that, job to live for, then they couldn't possibly be doing anything constructive with their time. So instead of like applying technology and allocating resources efficiently, there's just like so many different motivations for us to have scarcity and keep people working, instead of like, I don't know, I don't really have like a solution for it. I'm just pointing out that I think money is like a lot more limited than most people think, at least in allocating resources.
Well, jobs and money are just a means. Like there's a anecdote. I don't remember the whole story. It's about this guy who went to China, and he saw people digging a ditch or something like that with shovels, and he asked the foreman, because he spoke Chinese, why aren't you using shovels? Why don't you get like a backhoe and use the machinery to dig the hole instead? You'll get it done like a lot quicker with a lot less people. And the foreman was like, oh, we can't do that, because in China, we want to make sure people are working, so we use shovels instead of machinery. And he's like, oh, your job is to, oh, I didn't realize, I thought you were trying to dig a hole. I didn't realize you were trying to create jobs. Here's what you do: take away all their shovels and give them spoons, and you'll create so many more jobs. And so the point of that story is that jobs are not the goal. Jobs are just a means. People don't go to work because they just love to work. Like I don't get up in the morning, like my alarm goes off at like 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh yeah, I just can't wait to go work. I would love to stay home. I'd love to be retired at my age, but I have to go to work because I got bills to pay. Because I don't want to sleep outside in the gutter. So it's not work. It's your standard of living. If people could enjoy a standard of living without working, they would. I mean, this is why people play the lottery. They're trying to basically be rich so they can enjoy a standard of living without having to work.
And that's how I see it, right? It's like all these jobs all over the place where people are, if you want to use that example, they're using spoons instead of not just shovels, but instead of heavy machinery that would dig holes faster. So like all of the taxi cabs I see with like physical human drivers in them, I look at it and I think you could easily just be a robot and be much more efficient, safer, and you could be literally right now enjoying spare time. But no, society says you have to work. And there's the supermarket, there's people behind checkouts. I used to do that as a job. It's boring as hell, and they're pretty much there scanning barcodes when they can just be automated really easily. But it doesn't quite work because people aren't used to it. It's weird. So we have all these areas where there's like deliberate inefficiencies in order to maintain the need for people to be employed, more so than to actually do the task that they're supposed to be doing.
Well, and that's because basically fear of change. I mean, people, whenever they lose their job, and you see this, I mean, there are entire industries being propped up through government subsidies that should rightly be outsourced. Like the American steel industry, there's no reason for there to be an American steel industry. because other countries can produce steel much cheaper than the United States. However, because some of these steel mills are basically based in states that are very powerful in the electoral college, politicians throw money at them to make sure that these steel workers stay employed. And what that does, that raises the price of steel for everyone else in the economy. Trying to prop up a certain industry to make sure that jobs stay in America, it only benefits the people who work in that industry. It hurts everyone who buys those products from that industry, because they would be better off. Like, I'll give you a great example. Do you have high fructose corn syrup in Australia, or does your soda have actual sugar in it?
I think that it's in a lot of chocolate bars. I'm not too sure about like Coke and things like that.
Okay, because in the United States, if you pick up a can of Coke, the main ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. Now, if you go down to South America, the main ingredient is sugar. And the reason why that is because there's a lot of corn farms in the United States, especially in the middle of the country. Corn is like one of the biggest products of the United States. So, and sugar is very big in South America. So to protect American jobs, and so we put a tariff on sugar and we subsidize corn. And that makes corn cheaper than sugar. So the soda pop and the companies that make these soft drinks, it's cheaper for them to make corn syrup and modify it, basically chemically altered corn syrup, than use regular sugar, because of the government manipulating the prices in order to help American jobs. And it's stupid and it's unhealthy.
It's really unhealthy. Like, I was gonna touch upon that because, like, I know that, like, Thinking Ape recently made a video about how bad fructose is supposedly for people, and I think like he made some good points in the video. But like, what I really gathered from my understanding is, at least, is that like a lot of these experiments that show how quote unquote bad fructose is for people come from data that has been observed using high fructose corn syrup as the source of that fructose, instead of using sugars from actual real fruit. So consuming like high fructose corn syrup in high quantities is like really bad for your health. Apparently it causes lots of cancers and like energy spikes and all these other negative things. But if you're getting sugar from white sugar, that's still bad. And then you can go a little bit better and get it from brown sugar, and then you can go better and get it from actual fruit. So all of these things digest in our bodies in very different ways. And people hear, oh, fructose is bad for you, and then they stop eating fruit because of studies that have used high fructose corn syrup as the data.
Well, all carbohydrates are sugars. Your body converts all, like even vegetables that are carbohydrates become sugars during the digestive process. But my point is like the economics is just like egalitarianism is like this religion that we believe in for no reason, despite all the evidence. There's this belief that we have to create jobs, and that's more important than increasing the standard of living. But if you just think about it, I would rather be quote unquote poor and unemployable. Like, let's say there's no jobs, robots do everything. It's like Star Wars, where you got droids doing all the work. So what do people do? They just kind of like just mosey around. They just follow their dreams. I mean, if you have a standard of living that's being provided by these robots and these cheap products that they're producing, you're not going to care that you don't have a job, or that your job, whatever. You're gonna actually do what you want to do. Like, there's so many people who, and this, I did a video about this. The one about that Milo Yiannopoulos article talking about how if men aren't trying to get money to impress women, it's going to be the end of science and the end of philosophy, and that's horseshit. Men don't go into those fields to get pussy. They do it because they're passionate about it. And what men do to get pussy is they take menial jobs that pay, because they have to have money to attract women. They have to have money to provide for their families. So they take jobs they really don't like. I'm sure guys, grown men, who have a job that they hate, but they stay at that job because the benefits or the pay are good, and because they have a family they need to support. So they're just like, they're losing years off their life from stress, from a job they hate, just for the money. And if that would go away, and if those jobs just went away completely, the more jobs we automate, because robots don't need to get paid. They don't require healthcare benefits. A robot just requires, regular maintenance, and then boom, the robot is good. You don't need to pay it. It's a robot. So when robots take our jobs, it's actually a good thing, because that makes the products and services that they produce and provide almost free. If you have a robot car, like, I don't know, like a taxi cab costs like $5 a mile. I don't know what the actual going rate of a taxi cab is right now. Let's say it's $5 a mile. You put a robot in that taxi cab. How much is it going to cost for a robot? The robot doesn't need health care. It doesn't need to get paid. All it basically needs is a little bit of money for gas and maintenance for the car. So what you're going to have, the more competition, the lower the price. So I'm fine with robots taking all these menial jobs. Let them do it. That won't mean that people won't have jobs. It means people will be free to follow their passions, to produce things that robots can't produce. Basically, it'll be the end of menial labor, but it'll be the beginning of just like philosophy, science, innovation, all these things that people can do, that they actually are passionate about. I mean, you just think like, all right, no holds barred. If you won the lottery tomorrow and never had to work another day in your life, what would you do?
I'd probably just pretty much do the same thing I'm doing now, but I'd have a nicer place to live, and I'd probably go on holidays.
All right, so you would produce entertainment, informative. You'd be, an educator, an entertainer, something like that.
Yeah, I'd still make videos, and I'd probably continue to study architecture. Well, obviously I'm finished at the end of this year, so I'd probably still want to design buildings, design stuff, and create, most definitely. And I think that like money is like only a very small part of my motivation to do that.
So would it be fair to classify you as an artist?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So if you were free from the need to work for money, you would still be an artist. You would actually probably create more art, because if you were tied to a job, like let's say, you worked at an architectural firm, but you got paid through commission or through contract, and times were bad, so you had to take a second job doing God knows what, I don't know, doing kangaroo boxing or something like that. And so that would actually take time away from your art, because you would have to go work and earn money. If robots did all the menial jobs, you would actually have more time to do art. So you would actually see this, it would almost be like Star Trek. People would explore, people would do art, people would create, people would innovate, people would ask like probing philosophical questions. They would explore the universe simply out of curiosity, because they were bored, they had nothing else to do. Robots were doing everything, but because robots were doing everything, goods and services were basically free.
And
So
what I'm thinking from this discussion, right, is an idea I've had before too, is like men are motivated to be productive and create, but they want to get pussy. They want to get lots of women after them. So what do women want? They want money. So where men think they're motivated to get money, they're actually motivated to get pussy. It's just an abstraction. It's just another way of going about it.
well, not necessarily, because there are animals that are solitary, and they still are territorial. They still want to, like, if you think of animals don't have money, but they have territory that provides them food. That's like their resources. So obviously the bigger, stronger animal is going to have the best territory with the most fertile land that's going to produce the most food. That's his wealth, essentially, in the animal kingdom. So you have territorial animals that aren't really that interested in sex. They may, a female may wander into their territory, and they may hit it and quit it, but they're not necessarily looking for, they don't care. Like, a woman may not show up for years. They're not exactly like, where are the women? Oh, I got all this food. Where are they? They don't care. When the women show up, they show up. So men will acquire resources because we have an instinctual drive to dominate. We want to acquire, almost like, like a dragon, where they have their hoard of gold, and they like, what's the dragon going to spend all that gold on? Well, dragon isn't interested in spending the gold. They just like having the gold. In the same way, men like to dominate the world around them, including other men if they can, simply to do it. Simply they like to be number one for its own sake, and they'll do that. Now, women are just naturally attracted to that. That's just part of evolution, because again, women are trying to produce the best. They're trying to produce an environment that is conducive for their offspring. They want to find the biggest, baddest alpha male because they don't want another male to murder their offspring. And they need a male that will provide resources to them so they can take care of their offspring. So the women are interested in the propagation of the species, and men don't really, they've never cared about the propagation of their species. That's why nature gave man such a strong sex drive, because men are just interested in the sex. I mean, men don't like, let's make a baby. They're just like, bite the pillow, I'm coming in dry. They don't really think about what it's actually going to result in. Women are more interested in, they get the baby rabies, like, oh, the babies are so cute, I want a baby, give me a baby. It's just, we have different motivations. It all works together. I mean, evolution and nature gave us a very interesting dynamic where it all kind of works. And that's the problem with feminism and gynocentrism. It's trying to change nature. And to have a viable system, it has to be in harmony with nature. And it doesn't necessarily mean we just give in to our animalistic urges, but we have to acknowledge them, and we have to work within the confines of nature. You can't create a society in contradiction to nature and expect it to work. Like this whole idea of making men and women equal, having women do everything a man can do but in high heels, it's total bullshit. Clearly, women can't do everything a man can do, nor should they want to, because men can't do everything a woman can do. I mean, we just have different roles. It doesn't mean there aren't exceptional women. Like, I mean, just like when I talk about men being smarter than women, I mean, on average, men have higher IQs and score higher on tests, but there are women at the extremely high end of the bell curve that are smarter than the average man. The average man has an IQ of, I think, 115, and the average woman has an IQ of 105. However, and I'll just use an example, at the 130 IQ range, men outnumber women 2-1. And it only gets worse the higher you go. However, even though they outnumber women 2-1, there are still women with a 130 IQ. They're not like dinosaurs. They're not like extinct. It's not like a Nawalt issue. There are women who are intelligent. Now, if you're a woman with a 130 IQ, even though you're rare, you're still smarter than the average man. The average man only has an IQ of 115. So you are smarter than the average man. So, just by saying that women on average are not as intelligent as men doesn't mean an individual woman can't be different, can't be more intelligent, can't be more capable, can't be just as capable as performing on the level of a man. That, and that's that video about the 4% rule with women in the military. When you have women in the military, obviously women in general are weaker than men, but about 4% on average, when you open up combat to women, it seems that these integrated militaries like in Israel, in Canada, about 3 point whatever percent of the ground forces are actually consisting of women that can meet the standard. So it almost works out to a 4% rule, which means 96% of women don't meet the standard. They are inferior to men.
And you'd probably notice, like, if women's sports leagues were eroded, you'd probably find similar stats to that. Like 96% of the professional athletes would be men. What I find is like most women, not necessarily, but like, a lot of women, maybe they're not smart enough to understand the how the math works with statistical generalizations. Because when you're saying most women aren't as smart as men, you're not saying you're not as smart as me to another woman, but that's how most of them will perceive it emotionally.
And if they perceive it that way, it just proves that they are dumber than me, basically. I mean, there are women who, like, I've taken IQ tests, and I usually score around 130. In the 130s, sometimes 135, but I've never scored 140. So I can safely assume my IQ is in the 130s. And I've taken different kinds of tests too, so it's pretty solid. Now, there are women statistically who have a higher IQ than me. So, I mean, they're very, very rare, but they do exist. So if I meet a woman who has like a 140 IQ, I'm not going to feel ashamed acknowledging that she's smarter than me. But she's also extremely rare. It's extreme. I don't even. I think actually, after 140s, like women just drop off. Like there are no like female geniuses. They're like after 140, there's like the women IQ curve just drops off. But there are women who are smarter than 130, and that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that there are women out there in the world somewhere that are smarter than me. But on average, the average man is smarter than the average woman, and that's just a statistical fact. It shouldn't offend you. It's just like, I mean, I'm average build, and I'm pretty average, you know, physically for a chimpanzee, and there are chimpanzees that are bigger than me. Doesn't bother me at all. We're all, you know, the individual should not be intimidated by statistics. It's just like, you know, if you're black and you look at the crime statistics where it shows like, you know, the homicide rate in the black community is 8 times higher than in the white community per 100,000 people. It doesn't mean you're a murderer. It doesn't mean you go out committing crimes and shooting people, because, you know, there are people in your community that commit a lot more crime than people in another community. But that doesn't say anything about you. And I understand, like, you know, the whole idea of stereotypes and stuff like that, because there are people who paint with a broad brush, like, oh, well, I've seen people do this and you're like that, so I'm going to judge you. I get that. You know, it's not fair. But
Absolutely. I think like what MGTOW is in many ways is just like it's a realigning of human values and perceptions with reality, because like up until recently we haven't had the internet, we haven't been able to absorb as much data as we can now. So a lot of our biases that have been pushed onto us through tradition, culture, they're getting torn apart by the internet. And I don't know, like maybe our economic, political systems and our values all just kind of have to change in order to accommodate for the reality that we live in, as opposed to the reality we've been told, we've been thinking that we've been living in.
Well, yeah, I mean, we believe things not because they're true, but because they feel good. And some of these beliefs are clearly wrong, but we don't want to question them because, you know, they hurt people's feelings. Like, to just acknowledge that the sexes aren't equal, that, you know, men and women are just biologically different. I mean, just the fact that not only are we not acknowledging this clearly observable fact, this scientifically verifiable, undisputable fact.
And if I was to point that out in an educational institution like university, where people are meant to be knowledgeable and want to find knowledge and truth, I'd probably be fucking expelled or something.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And we're going so far off the rails that, you know, we're now promoting just stupid ideas. Like, I understand, like, just quick rant, you know, like the whole thing about trans people. I get, you know, to a point I understand the whole gender as a social construct. I'm not talking about your gender as in your sex, but the fact, you know, like men wearing pants and men having short hair and girls wearing dresses and having long hair, those are social constructs, because there are cultures and societies where the men have long hair and wear skirts. You know, like Legend of Zelda, Link wears a skirt. That's, you know, that is cultural, that is a social construct. So if you are an effeminate man and you feel comfortable in a dress and having long hair, but, you know, like, you're not a woman though. You're just a man who likes to you feel more comfortable wearing women's clothes and you feel effeminate for some reason, but you can never be a woman. But that alone is like, oh, you're transphobic. And I'm like, no, I'm just like being rational.
It's delusional to think that, like, just because you're wearing makeup, it makes you a woman. Like, I unlike most guys, I shave literally my entire body like once a week. Why? Because it feels good. Like, I don't like having hair everywhere all the time, especially in summer. And like, just because I'm doing that, I don't suddenly think, oh, I'm a girl. That's what girls do. Girls shave their legs. I'm a transsexual. It just doesn't equate to me. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just like the leap. Like, I mean, like what, 20 years ago, whatever. I mean, you had guys with long hair. You had like even the glam rock bands in the 80s. You had guys wearing girls' clothes and having long hair as part of their shtick in their band. So, dressing up like a girl and whatever wasn't. It's always been around. I mean, you look at old like Victorian things where the men with their powdered wigs and their tight tights and their little booty shorts and stuff like the fashion and everything. I understand that. Like fashion as it pertains to gender changes all the time. It's an absolutely social construct. But to take the step and say that I am a woman and you need to acknowledge me, you need to use your proper pronouns, is just so stupid. It's just like the fact that I even need to defend reality. Like, I mean, there was a time where if you rejected reality, you were just locked up in an asylum for being a crazy person. And now it's like you have to defend reality because people are just like, reality isn't important, only my feelings are important, only what I believe and what makes me happy is important. And I want to be called a woman, even though I have a penis and I'm just wearing women's clothes. And
there's a word for that when you think that reality is what you feel as opposed to what is actually verifiable. It's called solipsism. So basically, it's what I call like the female bias on estrogen. Really, it's pretty much just based around emotional sensitivities. And the idea that it comes from a very narcissistic and vain level as well, because on what level they're doing is they're saying, I am God, I define reality, biology, that doesn't matter. I think I'm a girl because, my emotions.
Well, yeah, but it's like, but if that's all being a man or a woman means, then what's the, like, it just takes away the entire point of having the distinction. Like if being a man or a woman is simply how you feel or how you want to dress or how you want people to talk to you, then what's the point of having language if words can just mean whatever you want them to mean? Like, you say, I'm a man. Well, you have a vagina and boobies and there's a baby sucking on one of them. Yeah, but I'm a man. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what's the point of having these words in our discourse if we can just redefine them based on our feelings? And yeah, it's dumb. And my whole thing, like what I started with, it started with my video, She'll Never Love You, where I just talk about human nature. And it's so fundamental. And the fact that people don't understand it because it's not taught anymore because it's considered controversial, which I don't know why. It's dumb. Like we could go on the History Channel, or not the History Channel, like some nature documentary, and you could see animals doing all kinds of stuff. Killing, having sex, whatever. Like, we study animals. We have zoos, animals are cute and cuddly and we all love animals. But then when we talk about human behavior, everything is just open to interpretation. Like, you can't, just imagine, just close your eyes and imagine a world where animals could be transgendered. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, you can't, like, hey, what sex is that, that antelope? You're like a veterinarian, you got an antelope on your desk. Like, I don't know. Let's ask the antelope. What sex do you feel like, Mr. Antelope? I mean, it's just so stupid. You have a penis, you're a man. You don't, you have a vagina, you're a woman. If you're a hermaphrodite and you pee out of your clitoris, you're a man. I don't know. That's kind of.
But yeah, I think you've got the right idea. I think it would be interesting if guys just started walking into females' toilets, and just say, oh, it's okay, I'm a transsexual, don't worry, and just start pissing in their toilets, because that's the attitude guys should adopt about it. They should just mock it. I don't think people should get arrested for going into girls' toilets, but I think you got the right idea. It's all a joke, and we should treat it as such, really.
Yeah, but the sad is it's almost like the world's most elaborate shit test, because feminism and egalitarianism are the same exact thing. It's just as irrational as someone saying I'm a man when they have a vagina, or I'm a girl when I have a penis. To say that men and women are equal, or that they are, like, some people will admit that there are physical differences in the sexes, but then they'll espouse some egalitarian belief that we have equal worth, and women are just as important. Well, no, they produce babies. That's been their sole job from the dawn of time. Men do everything else. Women, like, I mean, you just think about it, like, since second wave feminism, the Equal Pay Act has been around for like 50 years. And in that time, women are still behind men, not because, companies are legally allowed to pay them less. They're not. It's simply because of the differences between men and women. Women drop out of the workforce to have babies. And
in a way, it's almost like an inadvertent way that this collective shit test is being performed to get men to become more assertive, which is what women desire. So it's almost like an inadvertent shit test where men are being forced to adapt to this insanity that I guess mostly women are just pushing upon our culture.
Well, it's a little bit more insidious than that. The problem is women are basically like children, and what I mean by that is when a child needs discipline, but they don't want discipline. If you ask a child, would you rather, like, if you give a child what they want, they're going to eat candy all day and they're not going to brush their teeth. Now, it doesn't mean they want a toothache, but that is going to be the inevitable result of their choices, and it's up to the parents, it's up to the adults to basically tell them, no, you will not eat candy and you will brush your teeth because I don't want you getting a toothache. And women are the same way. When they are allowed to make these choices, when they're allowed to kind of assert their authority, when they're allowed to take the authority from men and assert their own authority, you get this kind of bullshit where women are they make these stupid demands because they don't have the capacity to appreciate the consequences of their actions. Just like a child doesn't have the capacity to appreciate a toothache. They don't understand that candy plus no brushing teeth equals toothache. And women don't I'll give you the perfect example, because we were mentioning consumer spending a while ago. So yes, women control about 80+% of consumer spending, but that's because men, basically their consumer spending is centered around women too. And so, but feminists complain about how men have all the high paying jobs, ignoring the fact that almost all that money that men earn in these high paying jobs gets spent on women, or gets spent on attracting women, or involves women in some way. And you can prove that very clearly by looking at bachelors. If you have a guy who's a committed bachelor like a MGTOW, go into his house and just look at all the fancy bling he has. He probably has none. He doesn't have fancy stuff. He has probably, the fanciest thing he has is probably going to be his video game system. He's not going to have fancy clothes. He's not going to have fancy jewelry unless it's part of his job. Like, I own a few suits just because of my job, but that's not because I like wearing suits. It's just part of my job. So men don't spend luxurious amounts of money on themselves. They spend luxurious amounts of money to attract women. And so all this money that men make flows to women, and yet feminism demands that women earn more money. And you see the other side of that, this whole concept of where have all the good men gone? Because of hypergamy, women always want a man that makes at least as much or more than them. However, because they've also demanded the government give them quotas and promote them when they're not qualified to these positions, so now you have women basically getting on the fast track to success. So now these women are making six figures. They're these career women, and now they're looking for a man that makes just as much or more than them. And these women are now in like their 30s, maybe 40s, and they're looking to find a good man. Well, the good men who are in their 30s and 40s earning a lot of money are dating 20-year-olds. They're not dating 30 or 40-year-old career women. They're dating, hot waitresses with firm titties. So these career women are finding like they can't find a good man. Now they could date down, but they choose not to because that's hypergamy. It doesn't work that way. They're not attracted to the cashier at Walmart.
Women would literally rather die alone with a house full of cats than to settle for a man that earns less than themselves, generally speaking.
They sometimes will temporarily, but you see the divorce rate. The divorce rate for married couples where the wife earns more than the husband is like 3 times as much as, like, just for example, it was the last study I looked, I quoted this in one of my videos, like in 68% of marriages, the husband earns more than the wife. In only 16% did they both earn about the same, and in only 14% did the wife earn more. So you look 68% versus 14%.
and that 14%, they're like 6 times more likely to initiate divorce against the husband, and also
he's done.
orgasm.
Yeah, especially if she's still young and she still has options. Now, if he like becomes disabled later in life and she's already hit the wall, she may stay with him or something like that as long as he has insurance and he's getting some kind of disability income. But yeah, women, hypergamy is a thing. It's a natural thing. It's tied to the maternal instinct. It's not necessarily bad, but it's bad to hide it. It's bad to lie about it and to send men blindly who don't understand what's going on, so they can be manipulated by it. That's just cruel. It's like not warning someone about the risks of, like hiding a minefield sign. Like, hey, can you walk across this field? And the guy sees a field of grass. He's like, sure, I'll walk across the field. And you don't tell him it's a minefield. So, like that would be immoral. I mean, telling a guy to walk across the field, that's nothing immoral about that. But telling a guy to walk across a minefield without telling him, even if he was if he was a mine sweeper, that was his job, and he had the equipment to look for mines, that wouldn't be immoral to tell him to do his job and look for the mines and disable the mines. But to just tell a random guy, hey, go walk through this field, and you're sweeping for mines by watching until he blows up, and then like stepping where he stepped, and then sending basically a bunch of men one after the other blowing up on mines to try to find a path through. That would be completely evil and immoral, because you're not warning them of what's going on, and you're just sacrificing them for your own convenience. And that's basically what hypergamy does when men aren't warned about it. If you're warned about it,
it's completely obsolete now. I mean, like the idea that men have to give women anything after like all men have given to them, and how little like respect like men have gotten in exchange for that. Like why should men do anything for women anymore, especially if it doesn't result in them getting any kind of like casual sex from it. I'm not like anti-hypergamy. I just think like men should always be aware of it, always have complete control over it. And when you get married, that's when you're losing control over it and giving it to someone else to hold over your head.
Yeah, there's no reason. I don't care how rah you are about women. Nobody should get married. It does not benefit the man at all. There is no benefit to the man. There was before, but third wave feminism, it's taken away everything. Like,
and the way I see it is as well is like, it's like being in a relationship where a person has a gun to your head. Even if they don't pull the trigger, it's not going to be really healthy for you mentally to be in that state where someone has so much power over you.
Well, I look at it as the way I evaluate marriage and conclude that it's total bullshit is you look at what marriage does for the woman and does for the man. So for the woman, what marriage, because a woman could as long as you live somewhere that didn't have common law marriage, a woman could just live with you and you could have children together and you could spend the rest of your lives together without any sort of legal contract at all. But what marriage does for the woman, it gives her guaranteed access to half your shit. And the fact that this is like these celebrities, like they have millions of dollars, they marry some supermodel for like a month, they get divorced, and she gets half of his money that he took a lifetime to earn. Like, I understand, if you want to get half the money he earned in the month you were married, I could almost understand that. He earned, $100,000 this 1 month you were married. You're entitled to half of that because you were married during that month. I can almost understand that. But to give him half of his entire fortune that he earned without you and you weren't even there doesn't make any sense. But that's what marriage does to a woman. It gives her complete 50% access to all your shit, regardless of how much it is, regardless of how much long it took you to earn it, regardless of what she did to contribute to it, which is usually jack shit. She gets half of it. And depending on the lifestyle that she's been accustomed to, quote unquote, you may have to pay her alimony up to like 20, 25% or more of your income going forward. So she gets half your shit up front, possibly a quarter of your shit going forward. And she has that guaranteed by law. So
it's completely insane. What I would like to see is like the next generation, like I say this like half jokingly, is like I'd like to see the next generation of women essentially just like grow old into their 80s in debt with a house full of cats, not married, with no kids. I think that like a lot of good could come from that if men just stopped doing stuff for women and focused on themselves, and essentially treat women the way that women treat men, is to not engage with them without some kind of like guaranteed mutual benefit. And if men did that, I think that most there wouldn't really be much of a relationship to be had.
Well, yeah, women wouldn't. Here's the thing: if you take away if you take away alimony and you take away a woman's guaranteed right to half of a man's shit during a divorce, women just won't get married anymore, because there's no one's just like men are walking away from marriage, women walk away from marriage. It would basically be the end of marriage, and society, they want to promote marriage because they want to promote children that they don't have to raise. Like the reason why. When a woman steals a man's sperm and gets pregnant, the man, like even like a man, there was a guy who was raped.
I've had nightmares about that, quite literally.
Well, there was a guy who was 16. He was raped by like a woman in her late 20s, like statutory rape, but he was like 16. She got pregnant. 2 years later, after he turned 18, she sued him for child support. Now, she raped him, and she still sued him for child support, her rape victim, and won, because hey, it was his kid. That's all. And the reason why the state doesn't care is because if the father doesn't pay child support, the state's going to have to pay child support. So it's really just a matter of convenience. Like, they don't care what happens to the man, how unfair it is and everything. They don't want to be left holding the bag and taking care of this woman's kid. So they'll just serve the man up.
See, I've literally had nightmares about it before, because like since I've been into MGTOW content, like most times I'm with women, I will pocket the used condoms and then go put it into the trash can that's like not in their house. And the times that I leave it in their house, I've actually had nightmares. Like it's ridiculous, because like it's essentially like you're leaving it feels kind of like you're leaving a credit card at someone's house that has like almost infinite money on it for them to take for the next 18 years, and you can't do anything about it legally. Yeah, and it's total bullshit. Now, you contrast the legal guarantees and protections marriage gives a woman, and then you think, okay, what legal protections and guarantees does marriage give a man? Absolutely none. Now, it wasn't always that way. Like, back in the day, if a woman cheated on her husband and the husband could prove it, she got nothing. So that basically gave him a guarantee to fidelity. And that was primarily what men married women for. They wanted to have children. They wanted sole sexual access to their wives. You married a woman so that you could have sex with her and no one else could have sex with her. You're basically claiming her for sexual monogamy. That's the purpose of marriage. Women held out like, you want to have sex with me, you have to marry me, and the men would say, okay, if I marry you, you can only have sex with me, and that was the deal. However, as adultery laws were overturned, adultery was no longer considered a factor when determining divorce. So a woman could commit adultery, a guy could have like videographic evidence showing my wife cheated on me, I don't think she deserves any of my money, and the judge will say, nope, she gets half your money anyway. In fact, you're going to pay your alimony, and she gets the kids and your house and your future and your retirement, even though she cheated on you. So a man has completely lost his guarantee to fidelity. And the other thing he lost was the guarantee to sex. Because prior to the 90s, and in the 80s is when the movement started, this whole idea of marital rape didn't exist. English common law was, when you say I do, just like, when the sperm leaves the tip of your penis, you're basically consenting to raise a child for 18 years. If the sperm finds its way to an egg and you conceive a child, you're basically agreeing to raise that child, regardless of whether you actually thought about that or consented. By having that sperm leave your penis, you're consenting to that in the eyes of the law. Well, prior to the 1980s, in the eyes of the law, when you said I do to your husband on your wedding day, you were consenting to please him sexually. To have and to hold, that's what that means, that to have part. So when a man says, hey, you're my wife, I'm horny, how about we do something about it? And you're like, no, I don't want to. Or how wives or girlfriends will like hold out for sex in order to manipulate you into giving them something they want. Well, if a man's like, no, you're my wife, and bite the pillow, I'm coming in dry, that wasn't a crime. That wasn't even remotely a crime. It was considered the wife's duty. That was her job. And it was you were consenting by getting married to the man. So marital rape was not even a crime at all.
And then starting in the 1980s, they made it a crime, but it had a very low punishment. Like the punishment for marital rape was very small compared to actual rape. And then in the 1990s,
because there is a huge difference between being, you know, raped by like a person in an alley at that point and just like not being in the mood and your boyfriend persisting. It's like they're two very different things. They shouldn't even have the same word.
Well, but it's basically like the woman's not consenting, and so in according this is again this is third wave feminism. This is one of third wave feminism's first major accomplishments, was marital rape. So they made the consequence for marital rape equal to raping a stranger in an alley with a knife to their throat. And now men have no guarantee for sex. Like if a wife is manipulating you, if you haven't had, like there are these men who haven't had sex in years. You know, the wife is just not in the mood. And there's nothing he can do about it. All he can do is like jerk off in the shower or something like that. That's his only option. So you don't have a guaranteed right. You don't have a guaranteed protected right to sex. You don't have a guaranteed right to fidelity. Your wife can cheat on you. She doesn't even have to have sex with you, and she still gets all your shit. So why would you want to get married? There is no benefit to the man. But I don't think most men know that. I think the reason why men continue to get married is, you know, they're maybe pressured by their families or their religion to you know, keep up the tradition, but they just don't understand that the laws have gotten so bad that a man gets literally nothing out of a marriage and gives up everything. He risks everything for nothing.
It's a bad life choice. Like generally speaking, it's not a very assertive decision. Men have nothing to gain from it, and you know, like more and more people just have to realize that as well. But I'm getting fairly exhausted, so I don't want to ramble on in a low energy state. So I think we should wrap things up. It's been awesome to talk to you in person after watching so many of your videos. I hope that we've provided, like, you know, the listeners with some good content to listen to, which I think we have. And yeah, I'll definitely be staying in tune with your videos and seeing what else you put out. Keep up the excellent work. Probably one of my top 3 MGTOW channels to watch. So I always enjoy when you put out a new video. Any last words to wrap up?
Well, I mean, feel free to edit out stuff. I know I rambled a lot, but you know, I enjoyed the talk. We covered a lot of different topics. You know, just yeah, I know I'm really busy and my schedule sucks, but yeah, don't be afraid to reach out, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been a good chat. I'll try to get in touch another time, perhaps. But yeah, I think, you know, it's now 3-hour podcast. I need to take a pee, have something to eat, and probably not uploading this on the actual No Holds Barred YouTube channel. Might take a while, but in the meantime, it's on this temporary one, which I'll probably publish with a quick video on my main channel as well. But yeah,
I didn't realize 3 hours. You may want to trim it down to like an hour and a half or something like that.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea, is it? What I'll do is I'll make us off the broadcast now, and we can chat offline for a bit. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.